issue. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Because everything was working great. And then after we did that, it's not.
Was that says sign order.
What's that point? I don't know. It's almost like it's on standby. No, it should show. Okay. There's always technology issues. Okay, if you could turn off your screen share just for a minute so we can let people see the opening of the meeting. Thank you. Okay. Sometimes one doesn't do for you. I'd like to open up the meeting and welcome you all. It's really great to be back. I wasn't here in January due to family health concerns, and I thank Linda for running the meeting for me. We have a very exciting and jam-packed schedule today. We have, first of all, our main speaker, and I'm going to get my paper, excuse me, and my microphone. That's all right. I'll just hold it. Our main speaker is Anna Jordan, and she is a student at the College of William and Mary, double majoring in geology and computer science. And she'll be talking about her internship here, where she worked on some mammal fossils with Sean Moran, who is the collections manager, and he's brought some specimens to go with it. But before we start our speaker, I'd like to see if we have any guests today who are either new members or are visiting with us today. And if you are, we'll get your names. Okay. I'm Joyce. Joyce. Okay, and how did you happen to come today?
Oh, I forgot the club a few years ago. I just never been to a meeting, and I've been on.
Great. Well, welcome. Right, other guests.
Manoa Daniel.
A new member. Well, welcome. Yes,
New member,
and you are.
Enola Nelson.
Well, welcome.
And I hear those?
Enola Nelson was the last one. And
Manoa.
Manoa Daniel. Any other guests or visitors? Okay, I just to do a little important business. There is a restroom key over there on a big, it looks like a bone. If you need to use the restroom, it's across the hall, but you'll need the key. Please remember to bring it back and don't lock it in there, because then we will have a hard time. I did that once, so I confess. Anyway, we will go ahead and have our speaker. And then after that, we have another speaker from the Geological Survey. So we'll introduce him at that time. So I'm going to turn it over right now to Anna to begin her talk. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
I'm going to need to turn up the volume.
Okay, so today I'm going to be talking to you about a deposit. Oh, can you hear me?
I'm trying to figure out, the speakers aren't connected correctly, I don't think. Well, I'll stick a microphone here.
Okay. So I'm going to be talking about a deposit of Pleistocene mammals that were found in a limestone quarry in North Carolina.
Okay, can you hold on a
Hold
minute?
on a minute, Anna.
Okay.
That's
We're
not
having
working.
some mic issues here.
Yeah, no worries.
All right.
Yeah. Everything was hooked up, but things got unhooked.
You give that a shot at?
Can you try?
Hello.
Try again, Anna.
So I'm going to be talking about Pleistocene mammals.
There's a second.
There's a speaker issue.
Yeah, it's not coming out of speakers.
Is there another plug that goes? Fail to detect. That's better.
I want to turn it down.
Well, we don't know till we hear the turn.
Give that a
Okay.
shot, Anna. I don't know if she can.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's a little bit better.
Let's try here too. It's up as loud as, almost as loud as it'll go. Nope, now I made it softer. All right, it's 100. That's as loud as it's gonna get. All right, give it a try again.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, but please just speak up so
Okay.
that we, you know.
Okay. So I'm going to be talking about a deposit of Pleistocene mammals that were found in a quarry in North Carolina. Okay, so they were found back in 2011 in an active limestone quarry. And because that quarry was active, it prevented more careful collection, and most of the specimens were actually found in the quarry's discard pile. There were some found in situ nearby though, and then the collectors donated it to North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences, where I was able to do some work repairing, researching, identifying, and cataloging them. So a closer look into the geologic setting here. So the bottommost layer in the quarry is the PD Formation from the late Cretaceous. On top of that is the New Hanover member and the comfort member of the Castle Hayne limestone, which is Eocene aged. And then within the comfort member, there were these pockets of Pleistocene sediments containing terrestrial fossils that were found. So here's a look at the stratigraphy in situ. The PD Formation is this dark layer here on the bottom. On top of that is a harder limestone layer, which is the New Hanover. And then the comfort member is on top. And then there's some sand and more modern sediments above that. But the Pleistocene deposits were found in this comfort member limestone. Here's a picture that was taken at the quarry during collection of an example of one of these pockets. This one is undisturbed by the quarry's operations, but when they were quarrying the limestone, they would come across these, and of course, they're not looking for Pleistocene sediment, so they would go in the discard piles, and that's where most of the material was from. So how this sediment got here, we believe it was deposited into these dissolution features of the limestone. So water came and made these caverns and openings by dissolving limestone, and then later during the Pleistocene, these sediments were washed into them or deposited in them. So to walk through the process of how these deposits might have happened with a pond sinkhole. So once the limestone is exposed terrestrially, water collects and forms a pond in a depression in the limestone, and this attracts life, animals and plants. And then as time goes on and animals are living and dying in and around the pond, they're being deposited, their bones are going into the sediments of the pond, and beneath the surface, the water from the pond is seeping through and forming a much larger cavity below the pond. Eventually, the pond, well, the sinkhole opens and swallows the pond because the cavity gets too large underneath it and the weight collapses in. And so all of the sediments from the pond are now in this cavity. And at this time, another way animals could be deposited here is if they fell into the pit or their remains were washed into the pit while the sinkhole was still open. After more time, the rest of the overhanging limestone would collapse into the pit, and all of this would be buried under new sediment. So most of the material here was found in one area, which we're calling Sinkhole 1. This is David Sanderson, one of the collectors, with some of the material found here. So there was one area near the discard piles where they found material in situ, and then also a lot of material from the discard piles. And due to the relative closeness, we're assuming that the discard material and the nearby in situ material all came from the same deposit. The second sinkhole where material is found is about 300 meters away. It's in the very edge of the quarry where they dug a test pit. And all of the material from this sinkhole is from armadillo, the giant armadillo. So this is an aerial picture of the quarry. This is the location of sinkhole 1 and the discard piles, although this picture was taken recently. So this material here is not the Pleistocene sediments. It's a new discard pile, and sinkhole 2 over in this corner has been filled in. So there's no more Pleistocene sediments currently exposed that we know about at the quarry. So the first step in the process was trying to get these specimens repaired. They were damaged. Some of them were pretty badly damaged. So for this, I used a thicker glue, Paraloid B72. And I used a dental tool here to just take a small amount, especially for these thin pieces, applying it to both sides. If there was dirt there, I would clean that out first before gluing it together. And then holding the pieces together until they had dried. Here's some before and after pictures of one of the more impressive repairs. So this left dentary here was in this shape when I started working on it this summer. And by the end of the summer, I was able to piece all the way up this part. It's still missing some chunks, but it's pretty good. Okay, next was building housing for the specimens. So I built cavity mounts for a lot of the specimens. This protects them from being further damaged, as you can see here on the left. When the specimens are loose like this in the drawer, they're susceptible to moving. When the drawer opens and closes, they might rock, and this can obviously lead to damage. For the bigger and heavier specimens, they can also break under their own weight when they're not properly supported. So the materials we used are relatively cheap. All we used was Ethafoam, Tyvek, and archival boxes. And I'm gonna walk through the process of how I made these mounts. So the first step is to cup the ethofoam into the shape of your box, but then tracing the outline of the bone onto it and cutting that out to make a cavity for it to sit in. Then since you want it sitting inside the foam, I shaved foam off the bottom, just cut a straight piece off the bottom here so that it was sunken in. And then to distribute the weight, I carved the top of this foam where the bone is sitting to fit the bone's contours when it rests on it. Then I went around and I cut an outline about 1/2 inch away from the cavity and 1/4 inch deep, just all the way around the cavity. Then I lined the inside with Tyvek and pressed, you can see it there, using a dental tool, pressing the Tyvek into that incision I just made all around the cavity. And then trimming away the excess Tyvek and tucking the remaining edges into the incision just to give it a nice clean finish. And then putting it in the box and putting the fossil in it. You want to make sure, again, since it's to prevent damage, making sure it's in there snugly enough that you can wiggle it and it won't move to simulate the drawers opening. And then also for more fragile specimens, you can cut out finger holes to indicate where it's safe to pick it up from, which can be helpful if there's some fragile pieces on one specimen. So for identifying the material, I used a few different resources. The first one I'm going to talk about is just looking into the literature. So what I found the most helpful were species descriptions, taxonomic reviews or reevaluations, and then some papers are just directly doing morphological comparisons between one genus and another, or one species and another, and those are quite helpful for getting an ID. For example, identifying between the Pleistocene tapirs in North America, they really only differ by their sizes. So using these tooth measurements to get at what species of tapir we had was important. The limitations here are really, for this material, it was more of what we had preserved and what we had present. We'll see later the tapir's jaw is a juvenile, so we only had a few adult teeth to measure and get that ID on. And then it's also limited by what has been figured or measured in the literature. Some of the things we had just had not been figured or measured enough times to be super useful. Another resource I used was Morphosource, which is a website that hosts 3D scans of specimens. So what's nice about Morphosource as compared to like a 2D figure is that you can rotate them and you can measure them. So being able to look at this 3D model on your screen while I was holding like this horse humerus and directly compare it to these two models of a horse and a tapir humerus. It was super useful to just visually compare them that way and being able to rotate it. The limitations here are there's less things that have been 3D scanned and uploaded to Morphosource than there are 2D figures that have been published. And then also, since it's just the scan and the IDs, there's no information, like background information telling you which of these morphological characters are important versus which ones might just be individual variations and not useful to identify them to species level. Another resource, digital collections that museums have published online. The biggest one I used was University of Florida's digital vertebrate paleontology collections. They have a nice searchable database and many photographs that are publicly available online. They have the standard views for each specimen labeled with the full taxonomy here. So yeah, just again, visually comparing the specimens that were at our museum to the pictures published online. Again, this is limited by what has been made publicly available by various museums. And then lastly, I was able to use the mammalogy and paleontology collections at North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences to compare to some of our material. The armadillo material, we were able to find a modern armadillo in the mammal collections and directly compare between these two to confirm that this is indeed an armadillo radius. This is probably the most limited because, again, it's just limited by what we have in collections and within that, what we have access to. For example, some of the mammal collections specimens are mounted, and that makes it a little bit harder to compare bones when they're articulated and mounted. So I also made some 3D scans of the material. So originally we tried using the museum's Artex spider, which is it's like a piece of equipment specifically made for making 3D scans. But it was having some issues. So we switched to using this iPhone app called Metascan. And so the Artex spider uses lasers to make 3D scans of the specimen, and then you go into their software and manually line them up to create the full 3D model. Metascan is much easier. You take pictures, it uses photogrammetric software to take pictures, and then it automatically compiles them into a model. So you don't have to line up the figures or do anything. You basically just take the pictures and it will make them for you. So this worked very, very well. Down here I have my process for taking these pictures. So I would go around the sides of the bone and then up over the top and then flip it and repeat. On the free version of Metascan, you have a maximum of 300 pictures that you can take for scans, like per model. So with these orbits, you get 300 easily. And I was really impressed. It's able to capture even, like you'll see later, the jaw and the teeth were captured really well on there. So yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna go through some of the pictures and the identifications that I made. So this is the distal end of a left humerus of a horse. We weren't able to identify it further than equus because in order to get a species level identification on equus, for most of them, you need population level data, like from the whole population, and we just don't have that here. We had this humerus, the very distal end of the right humerus, and then a tooth, which was not enough to make any further identifications. Here you can see an animation of the 3D scan of this astragalus. So this one, I originally identified it as bison. Thinking about Cervalsis or even Rangerford this far south just did not cross our minds. But recently, I think a tooth from Cervalsis washed up on a beach or was found, and so that made Sean think to take another look at this, and it is too slender for bison. So right now we're identifying it as Cervalsis, although that's a little tentative. But just, I guess the lesson here is something to keep in mind is it might be an unexpected identification like Cervalsis was for us. Here's another element from what we're calling Cervalsis that was originally identified as bison, but is again just too slender. The proximal phalanx of digit 3 or 4, which are the toes extended in artiodactyls like deer and bison. This is the astragalus from Castorides, the giant beaver. This one was also a little tough to identify. Not much published in the literature or on Morphosaurus or anything about Castorides astragali. So we had to send a few emails and also compare it to the modern beaver, although it is much bigger. This is Paramylodon, right humerus. So that's one of the giant ground sloths. This is a juvenile. You can tell because it's a lot smaller than you would expect a giant ground sloth humerus to be. It's also missing, or the epiphyses haven't fused yet. So there would be more to the top and bottom of this as an adult. You can also tell by the bone texture here, it's not as dense and more rugose. And there's a little animation of it. This is the armadillo material from that second sinkhole. So we have the ulna and the radius, which actually articulates. And based on the fact that these two articulate and they were all found together in that sinkhole, we're saying that the armadillo material from that sinkhole all belongs to the same individual. So it's all under one NCSM number. Dasypus bellus, beautiful armadillo, but it's pretty similar to the modern armadillo. It is larger though. We also have the left metatarsal, second metatarsal, and some more digit bones, like the little claw and a phalanx from digit 3. Here is an articulated carapace. So this was found all together like this. It's very beautiful. We also have a bunch of osteoderms that were found in the sinkhole, but aren't attached to this, which are not photographed here, but this is really nice. For the tapir material, so here we have this left radius and ulna. The radius is here, ulna over here, and then in the middle, I have them shown articulated. So these are associated since they articulate. This is again from a juvenile because the ulna is missing, or the epiphyses haven't fused, and so they aren't here. And then you can see the texture again on both sides of the ulna. Here is another juvenile tapir element. The left femur, again, it's missing like the femoral head and some of the things that haven't fused down here and up here, and that texture. And there it is spinning. And here is the left mandible. We actually had both sides of this mandible. The right side is much smaller. You'll see it in a second. But so this is the left side. Again, this is from a juvenile, which we can tell because there should be more, or an adult, there would be more molars back here. We only have the M1, and then these are the deciduous premolars, 2, 3, and 4 that are visible in the mandible. Here's my 3D scan of the mandible. As you can see, like even with such like relatively more complicated than some of the other bones, it was able to capture it quite well. Here is the right dentary. So we have some of the teeth associated with this. We have the M1, it's just not in the mandible. And then it has its deciduous premolars. Here is a metatarsal, second metatarsal from an adult tapir. The way we identified this was using these articular facets to determine between the metatarsals, like which one it was. Okay, and then taking a closer look at the juvenile mandible, we can actually start to get an age for the tapir. Looking at, so you see the deciduous premolars are in wear. Then the M1 here is less worn, and then, but it has erupted. And then taking a look into the inside of the jaw, you can see the second molar is here in the crypt, not erupting yet, but on its way to erupting. And same with the second premolar here. You can see the little tip of it has formed underneath the deciduous one. So based on that, and using this eruption series from a slightly smaller Pleistocene North American tapir, Tapirus pulcensis, which is over here on the right, and then correlating that with the age ranges down here, we're assuming that since they're both tapirs, their ontogenetic series and eruption series should be pretty similar, but that is something to consider, that I'm drawing a comparison to a different species here. So as I said, all the deciduous premolars and the M1 have erupted in our specimen and are in wear, and then we can see the P2 and the M2 in the crypt, and using this eruption series, it fits with the third step, which would be a juvenile tapir 1 to 2 years old. So to summarize, this is a graph showing the material by genus that we cataloged. So Horus, Equus, Tapirus, tapir, Cervalsis. Its common name is stag moose. It's a large cervid, like a deer. Dasypus, ours is Dasypus bellis, which is a larger armadillo. Paramylodon, the giant ground sloth, and Castoroides, the giant beaver. This is actually the number of cataloged elements. So considering all the loose osteoderms from Dasypus, if we did number of elements, just pure number of elements, Dasypus would be a lot higher up because we'd be counting all of those osteoderms individually. But in terms of cataloged elements, tapir is has the highest number. And then in orange is the number of elements that belong to a juvenile. So for tapir, that's most of what I showed, as well as some pelvis elements. And for Paramylodon, that's the humerus. So looking at this and the genera that are represented here, there's a bias towards these larger animals. And part of this is preservation bias in general. Large animals have larger bones and denser bones, which are more likely to be fossilized. But then the nature of the collecting in this active quarry would have contributed to that also, because it favored large bones that would have been easier to see and also less likely to be destroyed completely by the quarry operations. There are some smaller fossils we have found. There were some bags of matrix that were collected from the site that we're still in the process of going through. I think we found a tooth from a small rodent, but it's not enough to identify it. But hopefully we will get some smaller material out of that that is helpful to our interpretations of the site. So talking about interpretations, we tried to get a depositional age for this material. So up here on the top, we have millions of years. Then I put in the geologic ages, Pliocene and Pleistocene. And then we use the North American land mammal ages to get a depositional age. So the Blancan and the Irvingtonian, and then RLB stands for Rancho-Libraean at the tail end of the Pleistocene. So based on these identifications, our depositional age is really constrained by the earliest appearance of Castoroides and the last known occurrence of Papyrus hazei, which puts us in this early Irvingtonian for a depositional age. But if you take into account the Cervalsis material, which only occurs in the Rancho-Libraean, it throws some things off. So this is at the end because, yeah, it messes with our depositional age. And so this could be that our identification isn't right and it's something else. But if our identification is right and it is Cervalsis, it could indicate that it came from a different depositional event or a different like sinkhole, I guess, that formed, so that would throw into question our assumption that the sinkhole 1 material is all from the same deposit. And then it could also indicate that maybe like there was time averaging, although that is unlikely for a sinkhole because they tend to fill up pretty fast. For a paleo environment reconstruction, Papyrus hazei, tapirs like warmer weather, they like having access to water, and they like dense forests. although for Tapirus hazei specifically, there's evidence that it might have liked more open forests than its modern counterparts. Paramylodon and Pleistocene equus both have a range of habitats they could inhabit. Equus horses can be grazers or browsers. It really just depends on population and species level preferences. And same with Paramylodon. It can be either a grazer or a browser. So they both could support the idea of a more open forest or a forest near a grassland or something like that. Castoroides, the giant beaver, really heavily relies on aquatic plants. So that supports the idea that this was in or nearby a pond. There were also pond turtle material, box turtles, sliders, and snapping turtle material found at the site, which further supports it being a pond. And then again, Cervalis messing things up. So it also liked an open forest, but it liked colder weather, which is why it was surprising to see it so far south. Usually you think of caribou and these larger cervids in more northern, colder climates. So again, this could be a result of, like I talked earlier, different depositional horizons or different events. So based on that, this is what maybe our depositional environment looked like. Has a pond, the beaver, tapir, giant ground sloth, and then yeah, maybe the armadillo was in here too. And with that, I'd like to thank the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences for letting me come and work on this material. I'd like to thank specifically Sean and Christian for their help with the identification of these specimens and just generally advising me. I'd like to thank the William and Mary Geology Department who allowed me to come here and funded my work. And then lastly, David Sanderson for collecting the material, donating it here, and letting me work on it. So yeah.
We'll take a few minutes for questions. If there are any people who have questions about any of the presentation.
Were there any predatory animals?
The question was, were there any predatory animals?
We didn't find any in the material we had.
Okay. Any other? Yes.
Yeah, what's the precedence for finding Pleistocene sinkholes and Eocene limestone?
Yeah, so actually, especially in Florida, there's a really good record and a lot of sites where there are these infill dissolution features in the limestone that have been filled by Pleistocene sediments. So yeah, there's a lot of sites from Florida that I actually looked at to help understand this site.
Great.
Did you ever find any beaver teeth?
Any beaver teeth?
No, not that we have found. There might be some, maybe some hiding in the matrix bags, but unfortunately no teeth from the beaver.
Yes.
Do you have any ideas if that Cervosis is a wrong identification, do you have ideas for what it might be alternatively?
So it falls, the body to head ratios falls inside the ranges of Cervalsis and Rangifer. I don't know, so it could be Rangifer, the caribou, but that would also kind of have those same problems that we're having with the Cervalsis identification of it being further south and a little later than expected.
Yes.
Did you recover any pollen that might give you more of an indication as to the climate?
I don't think so. I only looked at the vertebrate material. So I think since it was an active quarry, like the collection process was so rushed that it was hard to, like, I'm impressed we even have the matrix bags to look through. It was, yeah.
Good question, though.
Was any other plant material?
So there was some like wood or root material that was in the sediment, but I don't think we've been able to take a close look at that yet.
Could be lack of scavengers or predators in the area, meaning that it happened very quickly. They didn't have time to find the dead herbivores and things there.
Oh, wait, can you repeat the question?
He said, could the animals have died really quickly so that there were no scavengers or predators able to get to them?
Yeah, so usually, or like ideally in these kind of deposits, you can go through fairly systematically and like plot the orientation and articulation of these bones as you go down, and that can give you an indication of how fast things were deposited and whether they fell in or the remains were washed in or if they'd been scavenged. But with this, since it had been disturbed by the quarry operations, we weren't able to do that. So we don't have a good idea of how fast everything was buried. We didn't see any evidence of scavenging in terms of like tooth marks on the bone, as far as we were able to tell. And then, yeah, so it's hard to say how fast this all fell in.
Any marks on the bones at all that would indicate they'd been attacked by scavengers, predators at all?
Yeah, so we didn't see any. That was something we were looking out for, because that would influence our interpretation of the deposit. So yeah, there weren't any marks on the bones or any material from predators, which is interesting.
Any other questions? Yes.
It looked like lots and lots and lots of little pieces. How long did it take you to put this stuff together?
For the tapir jaw, so part of it was going through and finding the scraps of bones because, again, since they weren't able to really take their time collecting, like I would be finding pieces of the tapir jaw like in with different bones and have to match it based on texture. I want to say it probably took me like a good couple of days, if not like a week, to get that thing all back together.
Wow. Yes.
You could speak to David and ask him to bring them together in whole sections next time.
Do we have any other questions? Well, we have greatly enjoyed your talk. It really was very, very interesting, and we want to thank you for your time today. We do have a second speaker today from the Geological Survey, so we're going to take a moment to let him get set up. And then he can go ahead and give his presentation as well. So, thank you, Anna. We'll get the lights on long enough to do that. And I will step aside so that you can come on up, Anna.
Thank you.
And you can, chart. Do whatever you need to do.
Okay.
And while he's doing that, I'm gonna get my
Yeah.
paper here. This is Jim Chapman, a geologist from the North Carolina Geological Survey. I think are we set?
Sure. So, like she said, my name is Jim Chapman. And I am with the North Carolina Geological Survey. I'm a geologist there. I recognize some faces. There's a bit of a crossover with the Carolina Geological Society, so I recognize a couple of you. I am not a paleontologist. Yes.
Share your screen.
I'll share my,
So they can see.
Yeah, minimize that.
I'll minimize that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Let me see if I can.
I'll let you. Yeah, let me see.
Well, I'm already on your other screen here, so that's okay. Yeah, let's see. It's not letting me do that, is it? Yeah, let me try again.
The other girl, you can see her face. It's getting shared. Okay, he's got his own. We can see it, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes it goes the other way.
this is your slide. So what? Yeah, you should find the Zoom. window.
I think you might minimize this and just bring up the Zoom.
Well, that's what I was trying to find.
Hit escape. Try that.
Trying to.
Zoom should be one of these down here. There we go. We're out now. See what's found. No, Anna's there. Like real wild news. He already looked at.
Yeah, I don't know what was going on back in 1823.
Oh, wait a
Your
minute.
guess is as good as mine.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's there. You might have to let us back in. Well, do it this way. Back on. Yeah, you're gonna have to let us back in.
Rosemary.
If Anna's there,
Yeah,
see if you can make that window bigger again.
yeah, I was trying,
There should be in the corner. Somewhere. Huh.
let me see if it's.
Zoom. Screen sharing meeting.
That's. All right.
Got more than one Google up here, but you know. On. Me. We apologize. And my mouse isn't working.
Let me. Yeah,
There we go. Okay. Yeah, it's working. I'm very sure.
but it's not.
Working. So. On your computer, you can see it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right. So, where was I? My name is Jim Chapman. I'm a geologist with the North Carolina Geological Survey. I'm not a paleontologist, so this may be a non sequitur for you guys. Um, um, we are about 23, currently we're about 23 people. That's with mixture of full-time and either temporary or time limited people. Why I am here, after we created this inaugural annual report, I sent it out to groups of who I thought were our constituents and our constituents, our stakeholders. And we consider the rock and mineral and fossil clubs in the state are part of our stakeholder group. So I sent this to your club, and Mike answered, I think right away and said, great, would you like to come speak to us? Sure, okay, yeah, no problem, about the annual report. So here I am, that's why I'm here. Then, I'm sorry,
A gentleman that's not really good with English, if you could face that way or be helpful.
this way.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So a little history about, well, first of all, about state geological surveys. State geological surveys generally fall into two major camps. They're either part of the big state public university geology program, and they'll actually be physically on campus in the department. And Kentucky is one of those states, Illinois, Nebraska, Iowa. The other camp is those surveys are state surveys are part of the state government. And that's what we are. We're part of the Department of Environmental Quality. There's pluses and minuses with both systems. But that's who we are. That's what state geological surveys are. Generally, we were founded, the North Carolina Geological Survey was founded in 1823, New Year's Eve, but still 1823. We are the first US state geological survey, which was more than a half a century before the USGS was founded in 1870, 1879, yes, which was about 12 years before the first National Geological Survey, the British Geological Survey, was founded. So we think that we are the oldest publicly funded geological survey in the world. We think, we haven't hard to nail that down, but we think that's true. Comes with a caveat, it's been shelved during several periods, most notably during the Civil War. So that is us. There it is. All right, that's us. Where are we? We have 3 offices, physical offices. Our main office is here in downtown Raleigh at the Archdale building, which was just quarter mile to the east, or to the north, just on the other side of the legislature building. And that is where our state geologist is, our section chief, the energy group, which I'm a part of, and our education outreach. And then we have a Raleigh field office and core repository where it's just a big warehouse mostly with some office space where we are mandated by the General Assembly to house, keep track of, to caretake rock core and sediment samples. And so that's where that lives. And then that's also where the Piedmont Geologist Group, Bedrock Mapping Group, and the Coastal Plain Sedimentology Group, that's where they live. And then we have a third office in what we call the Asheville Regional Office. It's actually in Swannanoa. And that's where the Blue Ridge Bedrock Mapping Group is, and the hazards group, so mostly landslide hazards. So that's us, that's where we are. Why the annual report? Why after 200 years, an annual report? Nobody told us to do it. The General Assembly didn't tell us to do it. The DEQ didn't tell us to do it. But we, talking amongst ourselves, we noticed that lots of people don't know who we are. People that we think are stakeholders that would benefit from our services have no idea we exist. And if they do know we exist, quite often they don't know what we do and how we can help them or collaborate with them or what have you. So that was the problem, and that's why we did this. And hopefully it'll be an annual report and not just a one-off. That's the hope.
Another 100 years.
Yeah, first annual, and yeah. So when you go to where you'll find this is when you go to our website, which you can easily find just by doing a Google search of the North Carolina Geological Survey. This will show up on the banner. And that's sort of the first thing you see when you open it and get through the storyboard. All right, so projects that were actually in the report. What is actually in the report? Our bread and butter is sort of the what's called state map. It's funded by the USGS, so it's federally funded. And that's what our bedrock mapping groups and the sedimentology group do most of the time. That's where their money or where their outside money comes from, funding. We had 8 projects last year. The USGS likes to put us in the 1 to 100,000 quadrangle maps, but those 1 to 100,000 quadrangle maps are made up of, I guess it'd be 1 to 24,000 quadrangle maps, which is the scale that we like to map at. It's what we're used to. So we had a number of those, several in the Asheville 100K, Chapel Hill 100K and the Rocky Mount 100K, all as part of the state map project. And then there's another mapping source that was sort of new to us. It's new to everybody. It's called the Earth Mapping Resources Initiative, or the MRI. It's a national effort to find what the U.S. currently considers critical minerals. You can find that online too. Rare earth elements are part of that list. Stuff that makes up your smartphone, basically. So we don't have to get it from China, I guess is the idea. And so that was part of the 8 sub-projects within state map. A lot of crossover there between the projects. And then this is the I called it here the mine recycle grant. We call it the mine waste grant. And that's also part of the Earth MRI. It's searching for critical minerals, but within mine waste, so mine tailing. So there's 2 parts to that project. One is an inventory, and that's all office work, and just inventory. Where are these things? Draw a polygon around them, describe them, who owns them, what's been done, and that all become part of the national database. And then the second part is the characterization. So we picked a mine. In this case, this year, it was the Tungsten Queen mine up in Vance County, just south of the Virginia border. And we've actually done the sample collecting several weeks ago. We did it over several days. And now they're just waiting to be prepared to be sent off for chemical analysis and what have you. So that was that project. And it's kind of fun. And a different USGS project, the National Geologic and Geophysical Data Preservation Program. We are, as I mentioned before, we are mandated by the state to caretake core logs and maps and other resource material. We had a annex building rotted collapse over years. Maybe a tree fell on it, I'm not sure. And so we applied for this grant, and we were supplied. We were granted the grant. And there wasn't enough money to rebuild the building, but it was enough money to buy a few Conex trailers. So they live out in our core repository facility, and these are a couple of my young colleagues sorting the boxes of core. Right. We built a mine resource data system, or MRDS. If you look up MRDS, you'll probably find the national MRDS. But this is specific to us, and we felt a need for it because the national MRDS with North Carolina information wasn't up to date, and it wasn't always accurate. So we thought it would be better to maintain our own, and would also make it easier for us to notify the USGS about updates with our information. So that was a big haul. I didn't have anything to do with that particular project, but that's what you see when you open it up. When you zoom in closer, you will see the icon from the legend on the right. And when you click on one, it'll give you information where it is, latitude, longitude, the name of it, who owns it, how how big is the footprint? What was the commodity? And so on. So that could actually be a useful information for your club, actually. And then this is a geochemical atlas that we built based on Nuri stream sediment data. If you're old enough, you remember the Nuri project. That was a national effort to locate uranium sources. Stands for National Uranium Resource Evaluation, I believe. It went from the early 70s to the early 80s. After 3 Mile Island, funding was cut off. National enthusiasm for nuclear energy went down the toilet. But before it did, they collected a lot of information. It wasn't just, so they weren't characterizing for just uranium, since they were characterizing the strata. They analyzed it for whatever they could. And so there's a lot of elemental information from the samples. And if you look up the Nuri data, there's 2 data sets. One's a water data set, but this is the stream sediment data set. And again, this is just a screen capture, but if you click on a point, it will give you information about where it is and how much parts per million or percentage, depending on what it is, was in that of the element that was in that sample. And there's a report that goes along with it that you could read through to see how we made it, what we considered, and that would be. Oh, you can't see it, but in the top left, the NCGS Bulletin 99 document, when you're in the actual interactive map, you can click on it. It's a PDF download. All right. And then we built a radon potential map, I should say, based on this was information provided to us from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. They have a radon program, and they sent out radon home kits, or it was amounted to almost 200,000. So this was actually my project, and I was looking, the Kentucky, state of Kentucky did something like this, and I was really impressed with it, and I wish that we could do it, but we just didn't have the data, so I went out looking, where's the data? Well, there's a lot of groundwater data, and in fact, for those of you that live in Wake County, you may know Evan Kane. He's a hydrogeologist for Wake County, and he's done a lot of good work with radon for Wake using groundwater information. But statewide, there's just not a whole lot of groundwater data. So I contacted the radon group, and they said, "Oh yeah, we have all these samples from the home kit. We'll share it with you." And so the next thing I knew, I was in a meeting with about 12 other people that I was leading, I guess. I was leading the meeting. What are you going to do? What can you do for us? I was just looking for data, but anyway, it was good. They were very nice people and very helpful. And so I was able to create this map based and tie it back to the geology using based on the 1985 geologic map of North Carolina. Which if you just do a Google search for North Carolina geologic map, that's the one you find. So it's tied back to that. So that's that's a screenshot of sort of what it looks like, but it's interactive. You can click on it and find information about the different geologic units. Call them geologic units because they're not all formations at that level. And what else? that project is more or less complete, although I think there's some work that could be done on the map. I might toy around with that. And I'm giving a talk down in Charlotte to an EPA radon group. They want to hear about making it a map, so I'll be down there next month doing that. And there should be a published peer review paper coming out about making it up pretty soon. I'm still writing that. So that kind of sums up the bulk of the big projects coming out of the survey last year. Geologic hazards group, they're a little bit different. They don't work from project money to project money. They are appropriated by the General Assembly. They keep a running inventory of landslides in the state, in the Blue Ridge, mostly. And they create landslide susceptibility models, which are very important if you learn to own land over there. And they also work with emergency management groups after big events. And then we actually do have an education and outreach group. And she works, her bread and butter is probably school groups, but she does plenty of outside groups as well. She manages our Earth Day festival. It's, I guess, next month. Past couple of years, we've had it at the River State Park, Intern, River. But I think we've outgrown that. It's done pretty well. So we're joining up with the state parks, and we're doing it at Falls Lake, I believe, this year. So you will notice again that I didn't mention paleontology once, except to say that I wasn't a paleontologist. We don't have a paleontologist on staff. I'm sorry to say, I wish we did. Maybe Anna would come work for us when she's finished with her studies.
Would you give us an apple?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, paleontologist.
We have, yeah. But not as a separate sort of main job duty, I guess.
Thank you. Well, thank you.
Sure.
How do I end screen sharing? Escape.
I have one question.
Yes.
A lot of us have a lot of fossils in our basement. How much radon do those give off?
Probably well, base.
Right on that very far.
Baseline, so.
Okay.
Say about hour.
Well, interesting question.
Some of our boats have radium.
Yeah.
We don't want to think about that. Well, we thank both of our speakers, and we're going to take a short break for refreshments. I'm going to make it